I'm gonna just jump right in so that we don't talk about anything super interesting and then not get it for the podcast.
Okay, fair enough.
Today on the spiritual ride, I am joined by Regan Caruthers, an author, healer, and founder of Asset Yoga Center. Reagan's journey has been anything but ordinary. She learned about meditation, Tai Chi, and divine love and was deeply connected to her inner wisdom as a child. But life's turbulence, as it often does, led her to bury that magic in pursuit of conventional success, rising in the corporate world, navigating a difficult first marriage, and facing deep personal challenges. A spiritual awakening at 27, Saturn return, anyone? Set her on a path of healing, ultimately leading back to her teachings of her youth. In her book, Tragic Magic, she shares her raw and inspiring journey of unraveling old wounds and reclaiming her intuitive gifts. Today, we're diving into her story, the power of transformation, and the magic we can all rediscover within. Welcome, Reagan.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. So you were telling me before we started, a set, the name of your yoga center. Can you explain the backstory where the name comes from?
Oh, yeah, sure. So you probably know her as Isis.
Yes.
That's what the Greeks called her, but she was Egyptian and her name is Aset. So, in wanting to honor just her wisdom, right, which is so vast, when I converted this big garage on my 10-acre estate to what I call my, come work on your shit center. Anyway, I thought, yeah, I wanted to name it after her.
I love that. I had so many questions written, but I kind of feel like I just now I want to ask you so many things. You have such a calm presence, but reading about your the book is not coming yet, so I haven't read the book. Amazon took a few days, but reading about your backstory on your website, it sounds like you were really deep in striving for success in the corporate world, and you seem to have such a grounding, calm energy now running a yoga studio. I feel like what happened? Was there like a catalytic moment that your life fell apart and you were like, I can't live like this anymore? How do you come to be so calm as you are now?
Discipline. No, nobody likes to hear that, but discipline of practice
Hmm.
is really, at least through my direct experience, what makes for more grounded, peaceful presence. And, I grew up with a lot of trauma. I
Okay.
had a mother who, was larger than life, brilliant, beautiful, um, but she couldn't regulate what she was connected to. Highly clairvoyant, and asked to represent the United States at the age of 16 to post war Europe in 1949. Um, my father, too. I mean, he had a full ride to Harvard at 16. And anyway, so I had a lot of power, in my DNA. And, I share in my book also some of the lineage. And yeah, so anyway, I came in with a lot. And then, given my mother's inability to regulate what she was connected to, she made tragic choices from a really dysregulated place. And while she could love larger than life, there were really dark days. So I didn't really have any safety
Hmm.
emotionally growing up. And then my stepfather was violent. So anyway, I had the privilege, through my mom, to attend a grade school where at the age of 3, I began learning meditation. And we did Tai Chi for gym, and we sang songs every morning about the power of prayer and divine love and conscious thought. And so that was also quite opening, right, of my conscious awareness. So I had, what I inherited plus this magical school, and it was more than I could deal with. So at 9, I screamed out loud for it all to stop. And it did. And then I had that dramatic awakening, at 27, which I detail in the book. But, in that 9 to 27 time, what I unconsciously believed or chose was that material success, corporate success, once I graduated from college, would lead to safety. And I
Mm,
think we often, I think a lot of us unconsciously believe that if we have a certain amount of material wealth or material success, that it's all going to be different.
yeah.
And it isn't. So I returned to the wisdom teachings, of my youth at 27. That brought me an opportunity to work at the HeartMath Institute as part of their staff. And then economics changed and I had to go back to corporate life. But um, anyway, I mean, there's so much to unpack. But what I will say is that the trauma of my young life really led my way. And
Mm.
even after my awakening, um, because I wasn't yet disciplined in my spiritual practice, my unhealed self was still running my show. And it wasn't until I learned how to take the access that I had as a kid and that I was reawakened to understand and take that energy of love, that divine love, that love that you can't even describe with words, and bring it in to all the traumatized aspects of myself and to hold loving witness with that energy to those wounds so that they could heal and so that I could, internally alchemize.
So everything you're saying, it's so beautiful, like intellectually, this idea of, divine love, and we know on an intellectual level it's true. But I feel like, because I also like had a very traumatic 20s and I would listen to this stuff. What do you say to someone that's like, I know that's the truth. How do we bring this love in to heal our wounds?
Yeah. So it starts with sitting down, closing your eyes, breathing through the heart, like literally focusing the breath through the heart.
Mm,
We could do this all together if you'd like,
I
your
would love
listeners.
that.
Yeah, so put your hands over your heart and take a deep inhale through the nose to a count of 4 or 5. Exhale to the same count and direct that breath. Have your focus be in the center of your chest where your hands are. And don't try too hard, just find an easeful rhythm. And now recall a moment in your life when you felt profound love. Maybe it's not necessarily divine love, or maybe the words, get in the way, but you have known a moment of profound love or profound gratitude. Beyond the image of that moment in time is how it felt. Re experience that feeling as deeply and as sincerely as you can while continuing to direct the breath through the heart. Okay, open your eyes. So it starts there. And what I, developed as like a process, which I don't really detail in my book, and I think I'm going to be writing another book, I think called How. It's what I got the
That's,
other day.
we all need that.
Yeah, it's just called How.
Yeah.
But what I did is I looked at developmental stages of my life. Let's say, birth to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, etc. And I really unpacked not only what I remember experiencing in those different stages, but what was imprinted, right? What did I learn? What was imprinted in terms of a belief about myself,
Mm.
about the larger world as a result of what I experienced? How did I choose to cope with those direct experiences, right? Like really doing that unpacking, that inventory. And then at those developmental stages, actually giving myself different names, just so I could keep everything straight. And then in the practice of accessing love, right, and having that heart focus, I would just bring that energy to those traumatized parts of me. Just like, I would visualize, what I either knew I looked like through photographs or remembered,
Mm,
right? And I would just invite her to be with me. And
mm.
I would just radiate this energy to her and say, hey, I'm no longer abandoning you. All the ways that I would bypass or, um, not acknowledge the truth of what I had known. That's a coping mechanism, right? But instead, holding loving witness, like bringing her, to a comfortable place. Maybe if she was a baby, holding her in my arms, or doing something that was appropriate in my visualization, and then telling her I was here, that I loved her, and asking her to tell me everything.
Mm.
Because those aspects of self have a point of view, and those points of view aren't wrong.
What do you mean exactly? They're not wrong.
Well, we tend to judge or shame maybe how we chose to cope based on what we have known, or, things like that. And instead, like when I was 18 months old and my mother finally awakened from a turbulent night's sleep, and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she finds me on the kitchen floor making a mayonnaise sandwich. How I got out of my crib, how I opened the fridge, I mean, I can't even barely open a mayonnaise jar today, much less how
Right.
did I do that for a year and a half, and then find a butter knife and two slices of bread. I mean, talk about resilience,
Yeah.
right? Because she wasn't responding to however long I was crying or
Mm.
asking for her, right? And so I decided, well, guess I got to do it myself. So that little itty bitty girl who actually articulated her first sentence as, I want to do it all by myself, had made a decision, that the only person I could safely rely on was me.
Mm.
And I wasn't wrong.
Right.
But where I then erred in having that traumatized aspect of self run my show is that I didn't trust anyone. I didn't allow people, even if
Mm.
they, were well intentioned,
Yeah.
to take care of me. It was a big F no to that, if that makes sense.
It
And then, frankly, my choice of partner, and he was my partner for 24 years, not a bad man, but my choice reflected my woundedness. I fell in love with him when I was 20, having done no work up to that point, really, on myself. So I chose a partner who really had no interest in taking care of me, right? Makes perfect sense.
because that's what you were manifesting, because that's what you believed that no one can take care of you. So you're going to get someone that's not going to take care. That makes perfect sense.
So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So really, doing that very courageous inner work, doing that unpacking, to me, in developing an inner life, that's like step one. Like, who's in there? And then any spiritual practice that you find that resonates, to first apply that to that. Because otherwise, what you're doing is what, we now, it's kind of in the vernacular, you end up just spiritually bypassing, just leapfrogging over all the shit,
Yes.
and getting to that, maybe transcendent um, place in consciousness, right? It's not as if you can't do that. You can still, feel that profundity of love. But what you're really not doing is acknowledging the truth of what you have experienced, and then use that energy and that awareness to go into all the stuck, dark, shadowy, terrifying places inside. To me, that's the point of it. practice
It's
because we
so
all have trauma.
I feel like when I got into spirituality, I didn't know about shadow work. And so it was just all this like putting glitter on everything. And it really wasn't until everything you're talking about that you like I feel like spirituality is really about shadow work, but it can be so painful. How do you help people like what's a good way to what do you tell your, yeah, like I mean the question is because I do the work I understand, but like when I first was I at first I couldn't even look at, how I felt based on how my childhood was. And I had like, drink too much, eating disorder, all of this.
You, me too.
It's
Yeah.
right. It's like, and you think that that's life. So what, I guess you said you had a spiritual awakening at 27. Like, was it just this like did Jesus talk to you? Were you just like, I can't do this anymore? Did you remember what you'd learned as a child? What was like the catalyst? Because I feel like sometimes we need to be broken open in order to really face our darkness, to heal it.
So, so the essence of what happened to me when I awakened in my hotel suite in a hotel in San Francisco at a national sales meeting
Oh
for
my
a
God.
global publisher. Um, and there was a lot of dysfunction, in my company, and there was a lot of darkness, that I was dealing with. Um, but anyway, at the time, I wasn't spiritual. I mean, if spiritual meant drinking a shot of vodka before I needed to go and present to these shadowy men, right?
Uh-huh.
Smoked another, Marble Light. Yeah, I mean, that was my spiritual practice. I was kind. I wasn't a bad person, but I certainly wasn't doing any conscious work. So what you need to understand, when I was a little girl, I would see things. Uh,
Mhm.
and a lot of what I saw, which I think was reflective of the energetics in my home, was terrifying. So I would see entities that were dark and
Ooh.
seemed demonic. There was one particular man that used to just follow me around. And sometimes, he didn't seem too frightening,
Like a
but
ghost? Like not
uh,
a real person, you mean? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's so many dimensions uh, that the visual spectrum can't process or see. I mean, there's so much more going on. So
right,
anyway,
absolutely.
the reason I was just born, I could hear people's thoughts as a little girl. You don't want to do that. That's literally, you don't want to do that. And so anyway, at the age of 9, this entity, for lack of a better word, was in this fiery throne on top of my washing machine. And I was downstairs with the music on, and I, was a gymnast and a dancer, and that was kind of how I would escape, the dysfunction upstairs. And there he was. And the terror that I felt, I don't have words for. And I just ran up the basement steps and I screamed out loud, "This all needs to stop." And it did.
Mm.
Okay, so fast forward, I'm back in my hotel suite. My best friend from childhood comes to stay with me because she's interviewing to get a job as a chef with Nancy Oakes at Boulevard in San Francisco. And she brings with her the book Return to Love by Marianne
Very
Williamson's
interesting.
Gift. And I opened the book and it's, like Christ consciousness, this and that. And I just looked at her like whatever, and I said, "I love you, Heidi, but I don't have time for this," as I, when smoked a cigarette quickly before I had to go back downstairs to this meeting. So anyway, this particular night, she decides to go and socialize in the city. I'm totally wiped. I'm so stressed. And all I want is a decent night's sleep. And I don't know, it was like 1 in the morning, maybe. I woke up from my sleep and I hadn't yet opened my eyes, and I knew someone was in my room. I could feel it. And the amount of terror that I felt inside before I opened my eyes was just like I used to feel as a kid. And there I opened my eyes, and there's that entity standing at the, edge of my bed.
Oof.
And I looked at him and I said, "It's you. It's only you. I'm not afraid of you." And I went back to sleep.
Oh my God.
Because I was doing like fighting the good fight in my corporate life anyway. So that was kind of, I had this like warrior spirit, and I still do. Anyway, when I woke up the next morning, all I could feel was unconditional love and oneness with everything, including these corporate executives who were doing, things. My stepfather, who was so abusive to me growing up, had just nothing but complete insight into why I had experienced what I had experienced. And all I could feel was the love of God. And that lasted for about 3 years. But what happened in the evenings during that time was, and I, just detail this in the book, was what I can only describe as an initiation, kind of like Luke Skywalker when he was training to be a Jedi. And remember that dark portal, and there's Darth Vader and all these shadowy figures, and he's learning, how to be an instrument of the light in the midst of all of that. And it's all, frankly, just a projection of his mind. You
Hmm.
remember that scene? Anyway,
Yeah,
so
a long time ago.
at night, I would get visited by all the same peeps that I used to see a lot as a kid. And I would wake up from sleep and they would be surrounding me. They would pull me out of my body against my will, like pull my spirit out of my body and take me to the most terrifying places. I know it sounds nuts, but it's the God
Oh,
honest. And what I ultimately learned through that, and this is really the answer to your question, is how to feel love in the presence of darkness. Just like I did when I awakened, right?
mm.
That sovereignty where I'm like, I'm not afraid of you. So then, as those visitations continued to happen, what I learned, and there was no book, there was no like post awakening manual for me to refer to, but what I learned was to have that same sovereignty, that same feeling of love, even for these dark, scary entities. And once I was able to feel that truly, they stopped.
So they were there, their mission, maybe the whole purpose of that was to get you to learn that lesson. Like maybe your soul picked that, having to deal with that on some level.
Don't know. I mean, I remember driving to a park with my son who was a toddler, and I was, in this state, right? And I'm driving my Volvo and I'm asking God and my guides, I'm like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
And they said, if you want to be an instrument of the light, you must understand and accept darkness.
That is like, I feel like that is true spirituality when you really get that on like a soul level. You said something else on your website that kind of ties into that I really, really liked. When you were writing about your mom and you were saying some West African shamans, they have this idea that those who experience mental illness are intended to become healers and spiritual leaders. And I feel like that's exactly what you were saying. I had mental illness as like most of my life, very depressed. Thankfully, ayahuasca cured me. But I that is so interesting. It's almost like, do you think our souls choose whether it's dealing with darkness, mental illness, because we know on some level that we're supposed to do more in this life? Or do you think God chose you to do that? Or,
I think the point of incarnation is to learn how to embody the love of God.
mm,
Um, and it's incredibly hard work. And some days I do it and some days I don't.
yeah,
It's the God honest truth. But that quality of love isn't for when it's easy,
right.
right? That quality of love, that kind of transcendent energy, is to be able to access that when it's hard. And if we want to be teachers, if we want to be light workers, if we want to be embodied of this, well, There's nothing like suffering that helps you be that true teacher. And sadly, in this culture right now, a lot of spiritual teachers um, act as if they have no shadow,
Mm,
act as if, they don't struggle, that there's, nothing for them to work out, that they've gotten, just do these three things and
right.
you'll manifest the life of your dreams. I mean, what bullshit. I mean, maybe it takes three things, or maybe it takes a million things. Nobody should try to quantify it,
Hmm.
right? But what I know is that when you can be sovereign in the midst of darkness, right? Or in the midst of negativity. I mean, just turn on the news for God's sake. I mean, every day we're bombarded with images of incredible darkness, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so what do? You either become beaten down by all of that, or you figure out how to transcend it and how to, be this loving, embodied person in the midst of it.
That's so funny because yeah, that I get so triggered by news or like things on social media of like animals being hurt or just stuff gets me so riled up. I'm like, go away. But I guess then you're living based on I have to control reality in order to feel good instead of finding some way to in the midst of that like feel love for either whoever's projecting these videos on us, if you want to go into trying to mind control, or just the pain of being on earth sometimes. So, what practices, obviously yoga, but what are your practices for getting this discipline?
Well, you need to sit,
Meditation?
eye- eyes closed every day.
For how long?
I can't tell you.
Because I do like 15 minutes a day. I have other practices, but I know some people sit for like an hour, like Joe Dispenza. So you do you just sit until you feel the peace, or you just ask your soul, how long do I need today?
Yeah, I mean, my practice is really twofold. It is the heart-centered meditation, consciously connecting to the energy of love,
Hmm.
prayer. We all have help,
Yeah.
and it has nothing to do with religious orientation or doctrine. You have help. You have ancestors,
Mm,
of high intention that want to help you. You have guides that have assigned themselves to you. You have guardian angels.
mm.
You have ascended masters. But kind of like the prime directive in Star Trek, I know I keep on using these moving TV analogies, but like the prime directive, they don't interfere without your permission. So ask for help. So that's what I do every day. I say, sweet loving spirit, angels of love and light, ancestors of the highest vibration and intention, Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, Aset, I humbly ask for you to be with me. I intend each day to be an instrument of the highest good, to embody the consciousness of the Christ. I ask for your help in doing so. Bring me the insights, the resources, and the people that I need to live my highest timeline, to make my highest contribution. And so it is.
Oh, that's magical.
So just finding, whatever is resonant for you as an ask.
Yeah.
And it
I,
was in, cultivating that quiet and cultivating that prayer and knowing, ever since I was a little kid, even though I took a break, um, what the voice of divine guidance sounds like, what the emotive, like the felt sense of that guidance is. And, you know, that guidance, like literally saved my life. I don't know if you read that yet in any of the things that you,
no, tell us.
yeah. So, after I moved to California at the age of 30, right, to work as part of the staff of the HeartMath Institute. And, living in Santa Cruz, California with the redwoods and the ocean, I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, it's full of stuff. You have to read the book to know what happened after. after HeartMath. But anyway, I thought that was my, forever place.
Mm.
And there was, a dystopian kind of response to COVID in California. We were locked down basically for 2 years. And my home wasn't really like a lockdown home. Like there was no office, and my husband was like
Mm.
doing Zoom in the living room all day long. And I had this book I wanted to write. So I decided to go to Joshua Tree, which is in the high desert near Palm Springs in California. Rented an Airbnb, just needed to get away. And I was, feeling really like I needed to renew and I wanted to write. So, I get to Joshua Tree, and again, I meditate and pray every day. And I had a particular prayer practice to guide my writing. So there I sit down and do it. And in that quiet, receptive place, the voice of God says, "You must urgently move home." Home was St. Louis. That's where I'd spent
Oh,
the first 30 years. So here I am living at the beach on Monterey Bay in a beautiful home with my second husband and my younger son. And I get the call to urgently move home. So I come out of meditation. I look to see if I have enough bars on my cell phone to make a phone call. And I call a friend in St. Louis who was a realtor. And I said, God says I have to urgently move home. And I do what I'm told. So I
wow.
flew out of Palm Springs the following morning to go to St. Louis. And I said, will you work with me and help me find where God wants me to be? Said, well, of course. My husband meets all of this with unconditional love.
Oh,
He's like,
wow.
I'm not getting away. I'm not getting in the way of what God's telling you to do. So I get to St. Louis. Nothing feels resonant as we're looking, for places to live. And then in meditation, God says Franklin County. I literally don't even know what that means. And so I tell my realtor friend, God says Franklin County, which is about an hour west of St. Louis. And I find, where I now live. But the only thing in the description that was missing was I wanted my own water. I wanted my own well because of dealing with, drought conditions in California for so long and $400 water bills and stuff. So anyway, but I said to her, so let's go see it anyway because it checks all the other boxes. You can't have everything. We get to, my home, and the owner comes up the driveway in a golf cart. It's a 10-acre estate that I've got. And I don't even think I've said hello. And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, young lady, I should let you know we have a geothermal well here." And so
Wow.
I knew in that moment that God was like, this is it.
Yeah.
So 3 months later, we are living in rural Missouri. We sold our beautiful house on the beach in Aptos, California,
Oh my
which is south
God.
of Santa Cruz. Get all moved in March. It's now June. I'm working on the design of converting my garage into my yoga center. Again, praying and meditating every day. And this day in June, uh, God says, you need to urgently go to a doctor. I'm like, okay. I don't go to Western doctors for lots of reasons, but I was like, okay, sure. So I make an appointment the following day because it's a small town. And the sweet country doctor, what doctors do. And he listens to my heart. And he says, Regan, something's terribly wrong. You have a really loud murmur. I need to get you scheduled for an echocardiogram as quickly as possible. That ends up being the following day. And then the day after that, I learn I'm dying.
How long ago was this?
This was July. Well, the surgery was in July of 22.
Okay.
So I heeded the call. I got the call to move in December of 21. I was here in March of 22. And then it's now June of 22. I learn I'm dying from a congenital birth defect in my heart,
Oh my God.
and that the only solution is open heart surgery. Now, Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, where I was born, where my first son was born, um, just happens to be one of the best places in the world for the surgery that I needed. So that surgery was in July 29th, at 5 in the morning. And it was a Friday morning, and I was home on Tuesday. It's like I was breaking records in there. I was cleared from the ICU the following morning. They replaced my aortic valve. It's not a, inconsequential surgery. Um, and the head of cardiothoracic surgery at Barnes Hospital, one of the best surgeons in the world, was my surgeon. And he comes to see me on my day of discharge, having told my husband and kids this already. He said, Regan, there is no clinical explanation of you. Clinically, there's no explanation of how you were alive
This
prior to that,
long? Like you,
ever. Just that I was alive.
like at all, your whole
Well,
life,
no, just given the state of
circumstance.
the aortic valve. It was the worst aortic valve he'd ever seen
Oh my
in
God.
his entire career. Typically, you have like a $0.50 of room for blood to flow through the aortic valve. In my case, it was less than the diameter of a Q-tip stick. And I said to him when he told me this, I said, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" I said, and I asked that from a very wide point of view.
Yeah.
He said, "I do." I said, "Well, that's the only explanation I have." So I knew in that moment, I mean, not only was he an expert, right? But I knew that accessing divine love through my heart, which was my practice, was what had kept me alive.
Oh my God.
And then gets even, I almost die of heart inflammation post surgery, but I know I'm not going to die because if I wasn't supposed to be alive before, like, why would I die of that? So I was hopeful, but it took 6 months for me to get well. I was in bed uh, mostly for 6 months. And I knew I was healed on the winter solstice, the
Mhm.
darkest
Wow. And you're healed
month
now.
of the year. I just intuitively knew, and then the blood work bared it out. And then fast forward, it's April now of 22, and a Christian mystic friend of mine dies suddenly. And so I go to Florida for his memorial, and it's Palm Sunday. I don't know what Palm Sunday is, right? I'm not a traditional Christian. I love Jesus, but I'm not a traditional. So I look up on Google, what is Palm Sunday? Because here I am at his service, and then I understand that's when Jesus, yeah, they're throwing palms at him and calling him, Lord and Savior and stuff. Anyway, so after the service, and I'm so full of grief, I return to my hotel room, and I just want to go to the beach. I'm in Florida, and I just want to get some sun. So I, take off my clothes, and my husband had sweetly bought me a swimming suit with a zipper to cover up my scar. And I'm, getting ready to go to the beach, and I don't have any clothes on. I'm in the bathroom, and I look at myself, and I'm like, my scar looks different. And I get closer to the mirror because, I didn't have my glasses on. And sure enough, my scars changed shape, and I have a crucifix on my chest.
No way. That's
Way.
what you have behind you on the, wow. That's amazing. Were you connected? Were you raised Christian? I mean, I know like I know you're speaking of Jesus. I'm getting the feeling you're not speaking of him in like a religiosity sort of way, just like a teacher of
No, I mean,
divine
the
love.
doctrine, I mean, that's a whole other podcast. The
Yeah.
doctrine of Christianity was created by Paul, not by
Okay.
Jesus. But anyway, don't need to
Yeah.
get into all that. I mean, Jesus's teachings was the law of one, right?
Okay.
Love
Yeah.
God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? That was the essence of what he taught.
Right.
So that quality, of love. And when I learned about my diagnosis, because there was, about a month before my surgery where I had to, do a lot of different tests, and, there was a lot of preparation. And I just intuitively was drawn to Jesus.
Wow.
So that was who I began praying to. I call
Yeah.
him Yeshua because that's his true pronunciation of his name in Aramaic, the language he spoke. Jesus is what the Romans called him, same folks that killed him. But anyway, so I call him by his Aramaic name, and he just became my guy. I read as much as I could. I read all the Gnostic gospels, all the gospels that were hidden away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People don't realize that the New Testament reflects an editorial process. There was a lot of
Absolutely.
other
Yeah.
things. So I was drawn to just doing the deepest dive into who he was. And yeah, I mean, and now I'm, a walking billboard.
I love that. I actually have a tattoo that's now it's faded because it was light purple, but it was one of his quotes. It's John 3:16 and it means ye are gods. And this idea, and a Christian friend of mine was like, "Oh, you misunderstand it." And I was like, "No, I fully understand what he was saying and I accept that. That's what he was trying to show us is like the power that you're able to heal yourself by doing what he said because we have that same energy." And that's what he's been trying to tell us. That's an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, what in Luke 17:21, he says, the kingdom of God is within you,
Yeah.
right? And I often, when I talk about that in my yoga classes and people have their eyes closed, and I'll, recite that scripture and then also look at similar things that are said in the Vedas and in yogic texts and the
Hmm.
Gita and the Upanishads and all that. And I ask people to point on their bodies where they believe the kingdom of God is.
Hmm.
Well, they don't grab their head, right?
Right.
They do this. I mean, we know this on some intuitive level that our spirit, that the kingdom of God resides in the heart.
And I'm not even someone that's like cares about the science side because I'm more intuitive, but even science is saying this now about stuff with electromagnetic. I'm sure you working at the Math Institute, like that this is like where our power is, right? Like this, even with manifestation, it's mind and heart. That's so fascinating. Speaking of intuition, because you talk about this on your website, how people ask me this all the time, how to know if something is like like if it's intuition, when something seems like it's going to be scary, or is it fear, or is it subconscious blocks? How do you think is the best way to practice really getting in touch with what your soul is trying to tell you?
Um, yeah, that's a hard one to describe. There's a certain felt sense of it when you
Hmm.
receive divine guidance. It feels a certain way,
Okay.
has this abiding peace. Like even when I was told to urgently move home, there
Yeah.
was there was no fear in the message.
It wasn't like an urgent move home. It just said urgently, kind of.
Urgently move home, but very
Yeah.
matter of factly,
Yeah.
very sort of, yeah. So there's a felt sense to the guidance. Um, and it also sounds, there's an audible quality to it too. And so what I would just tell your listeners, you kind of just have to practice. So
Mm.
sometimes if you receive a message and you have the courage to act upon it and it ends up being the wrong thing, well, remember, okay, what did that
Feel like,
message feel like? What
yeah.
did it sound like? And then again, you keep showing up on your cushion, on your chair in the quiet, asking for help, asking for guidance. And then you get some and you act upon it and it's just the right thing. Then you remember, okay, what was the felt sense of that? What did that sound like? So it's like to get that discernment requires you to experiment and to
Mm.
always not always, but to more often than not act upon that inner guidance in order to discern in time what is what, if that makes sense. But what I will say, in my experience, inner guidance is quite matter of fact. It's almost emotionless.
Hmm.
It's so profoundly neutral
Okay.
in how it feels because in those realms where you're receiving that information, there is no fear. So they're not going to communicate to you from a place of fear.
So
It's
fear is more just our when we're like, I feel like I got this message that I shouldn't get on this plane or whatever. That's probably just like a subconscious block or
I can't say.
yeah, you can't
I
say it's kind of a personal.
maybe you should get off the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Um, for whatever reason, I was just graced with kind of just knowing what that is. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember it, and I there's a scene in the book where I'm 13, the orthodontist with my mother, and it's quiet in the car, which is never happens, but it was, and I'm staring out the window, and this, voice, and again, I was still pretty shut down, but anyway, I still had some semblance of an inner life, and this voice said, "You need to repeat the ninth grade." So I was 2 years ahead of myself because my grade school, where I, meditation and Tai Chi and photographed my energy field with Carillion film and sang songs.
Wow.
Anyway, there was no grade or grade level. And so I ended up, everything was customized, individualized. So I just ended up ahead. And so at 13, I was like really small. It was very short. It was scrawny. I was smarter than everyone. I mean, it just was how it was. But I was bullied. I mean, it was just awful. And so the guidance was, catch up with yourself.
Mm.
But I was a straight A student. So anyway, I said to my mom, I said, Mom, this is in the car on the way to the orthodontist after I got the message. I said, Mom, I want to repeat the ninth grade. I need to catch up with myself. And she said, Well, honey, I don't know a thing about that, but you've got my full support. So
Wonderful.
a month later, I'm giving a presentation to the Board of Education for my school district about, the social emotional reasons for
Yeah.
wanting to do this, because there was no mechanism to allow a straight A student to repeat a grade. And they said yes. And it was a turning point in my adolescent life. So even that moment helped me discern later, particularly after I fully awakened. I remembered what the felt sense, what the sound of that guidance is.
I love that. And in terms of awakening, do you feel that anyone can awaken in a lifetime, or do you think that you've just been here a lot of lifetimes and that it takes a while to get there?
Oh, that's such a great question. I have no effing idea. All I know for myself is I'm very old.
Old soul.
Oh, and one of the things, that I just, for whatever reason, can remember, and a lot of it came flooding back post awakening, was other lifetimes, other
Hmm.
roles that I played. And that's why Aset and Egyptian mysticism is so personal for me, just given time that I spent there. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know. I think anybody, because we're all made the same, right? We're all built the same, at least fundamentally. We're all manifestations of the divine, right? We're
Hmm.
all that. So, theoretically, I think anybody could awaken.
Right.
But I tend to think that those that awaken have been there before.
Yeah.
And those that have awakened have, at least in other lifetimes, been disciplined in a practice,
Yeah.
right? Have created the conditions within their soul structure to know this already. And so it's more a remembering,
Hmm.
not an awakening into something new,
Hmm.
a remembering of something that you already know.
That makes sense because there's people that are drawn to this work. I mean, some of us are drawn to it because we go through pain and we're like, I need to get out of it. Oh, spirituality helps me. But then there's like, not everyone in the world wants to meditate and do yoga, but it's probably because they did it in a past life. And like you said, there's a connection to remembering that this is why I'm here kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is, regardless of your soul history and any of that, none of this works in the absence of a disciplined practice.
Hmm.
I mean, I had my awakening at 27, and was my 30s and early 40s a hot mess? Um, Absolutely. I mean, read my book, you'll read
I'm
all of
excited to read. I love the
it.
title, Tragic
But
Magic.
um, what I finally was able to return to in my early 40s, and I'm almost 60 now, um, was this discipline of practice.
Hmm.
And that's when everything became a hell of a lot easier.
And
And
do
it
you,
doesn't mean I don't have a difficult day, right? It doesn't
right.
mean that everything is unicorns and rainbows. Absolutely not. But I have a practice, I have a process. I know that no matter the quality of my day, I need to return to myself and I
Yeah.
need to spend time there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the pull of the external world, the just shit show of what it means to be a human being on this planet right now will eat you up. It'll eat you alive. No matter how enlightened you may have once been, right? No matter, here I had this exceptional school, I have this dramatic awakening, I work at HeartMath, like didn't matter. What mattered was the discipline of the practice. Then I could truly, alchemize it all and find more ease.
Do you find that in terms of ease, you find that your life, quote unquote, manifests in an easier, more blissful way, or are you just talking about you just feel more ease just being a human?
I just have more peace because um, the best way I can describe it is everything that I have known as Regan Caruthers
Mhm.
now makes perfect sense.
What do you mean?
I just know I see how it all fit together in an
Ah,
incredibly complex puzzle that now has made me, right, who I now am. I mean, even the other night, because there was a lot of tumult with my sons that I won't go into, but as a result, right, like I had all this trauma. I made, a choice as a young woman in my, first partner. We had two children together. So there's still a wake, right? There's still ripples from the unhealed choices that I had made in my
mm,
past, right? You can see evidence of it still, right? And so in the absence of a disciplined practice, I think I might feel shame or
yeah,
guilt, or I might feel hopeless. But instead, now what I can truly sense is the divine meaning in all of it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it doesn't make it easy, right? Like having a spiritual practice, like I said, it's not, unicorns and rainbows and everything's just, oh, sunshine and light, and only good vibes here and all that spiritual bypassing BS. No, it's to just continue to drop in
hmm,
and to consciously ask for help and to do your very best every day to bring in the energy, the love of God into your heart. And some days are easier than others. Some days you might sit on your meditation cushion or in your favorite chair and like, wow, this is so easy today. And then other days, it's like, oh my effing God, right? And like all maybe you can get to is a feeling of neutral.
hmm,
And I don't want your listeners to have an expectation, to put an expectation on themselves that when they become spiritual, it's all, it's easy. It may actually be the opposite, in that the
mm,
more conscious you become, the more able you are to look honestly at all the suffering,
yeah,
but still feel love,
oh,
compassion, divine acknowledgement of it instead of looking away or leapfrogging over it, like to actually give loving witness to the darkness that you do see
And
or that
that's
you
how
are
we
experiencing.
heal it, is with that energy. That is so true.
Yeah, and not to put anybody under the bus, but I think spiritual teachers who are more in the public eye than me are doing people a great disservice by not speaking more about this,
Mm,
um, by not authentically sharing more of their shadow, more
mm,
they continue to grapple with the challenge, because then you're putting forth an idealization that no one can truly experience in any sustained way. Yeah, maybe a Tuesday feels like that, right? But um, yeah, so my work and what I'm hoping to do is just to bring more authentic voice uh, to what it means to have a spiritual life. And the yogic tradition is a great help in that. You know, people think of yoga as the physical practice,
mhm.
which is asana in Sanskrit. Well, there's 8 limbs to yoga. Asana is one of 8. There's so much more, to what it means to practice yoga than, putting your foot over your head or yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time, but I just want to really acknowledge you. I love something that we didn't really touch on, and I'm excited to read the book. But how, when you're talking about the shadow, I just want to say this for my listeners. You mentioned about an extramarital affair. And when I read that, I was like, thank you. Because I had things that, I mean, maybe I haven't shared publicly yet, but things in my life, the eating disorder was a big one that I felt shame about for so long, drug use, drinking too much. Now I've faced the shadow, but more people need to speak out about something that society thinks of as like shameful. I'm like, so many people have probably gone through this and they're afraid to voice it. And your secrets, you're only as sick as your secrets. When people like you speak about something that other people are afraid to tell anyone, it brings healing because it makes it, you're like seeing people that don't even realize you're seeing them by your story. So I just think it's so beautiful how honest you are. And I just think you're right. A lot of the spiritual, our industry, I guess, it would be in greater service for us to be more open about our shadows. And that's how we like let each other know that it's okay and we all go through these human experiences.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wrote it. And that's what I, told my sons, right?
Wow.
We can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And
Yes.
all of it needs to be brought into the light. And so, as long as you're keeping secrets, as long as you're not being honest about what choices you've made, right? I mean, I had that affair after my awakening.
Yeah, because like you said, it's not a just a one and done.
No, no, no.
And there was a reason for that. Like there should be no sh the choices we make, like we let ourselves feel shame, but it was like that was our soul's path to learn a lesson. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I wouldn't want it any other way.
so wonderful.
And I hope, if people read Tragic Magic, that it inspires them to do the true work, the
Hmm.
real work, not the spiritual bypassing work. That's easy.
Yeah, that is easy. Love and light.
Yeah, love and light and good vibes only. I mean, what a bunch of BS. Um, it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And the real power comes by being able to transmute and alchemize the darkness with the love.
You just said something that the last time I did mushrooms, I do mushrooms for like healing reasons. It literally told me, you now know how to alchemize. It used that word, like alchemizing darkness into light. It's so true. So I'm going to link everything about you in the show notes, but can you please tell our listeners where they can get your book? I will link your website, but what your website is, social media.
Sure. Thank you. So you can get Tragic Magic on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, either as an ebook or a paperback. That's super easy to do. I have a website, Regan Caruthers. So that's ReganCaruthers, the mouthful.com. I'm also in the process of redesigning my website. But anyway, so they can go there for some support and some inspiration. And then follow me on Instagram at Regan Caruthers. I tend to post at least 4 videos a week. Um, it's funny. It was about 6 months ago that I decided I needed to do stuff on Instagram. I had like 200 followers, and now I have over 10,000. I can't even believe it.
Amazing.
So something is resonating. Yeah, so follow me there. If you would like my support in what I call inner life coaching, that can be done, via Zoom or just on the phone. Because sometimes on Zoom, we get self-conscious and we're looking at ourselves, in the camera and stuff. So sometimes it's easier just to have a conversation. So I, try to help people develop their own unique spiritual practice. And
Mm.
I'm sort of the accountability partner in that. Like, did you show up?
Did you
Um,
meditate today?
yeah. Did you do the work today? So yeah, they can get that support from me if they'd like. And what I'd say is just keep going, keep going.
Well, thank you so much. And to all our listeners out there, keep going, do something your future self would help. Thank you for today and have a blessed week.